In this tutorial, I'll show you 4 ways to import animated 3D objects to After Effects. Let's go! So as you may know, the next version of After Effects will allow you to import native 3D objects and work with them without any third-party effect. If you didn't know about it, there is a link below for a tutorial about this topic. However, as things stand now, those objects are stationary. Even if they had animation in the 3D app, you won't be able to include it when you import the object into After Effects. So here are 4 ways to work around this limitation. The first one is a built-in solution using the CINEWARE effect, and the other 3 relies on third-party effects. Which one? Well, you need to keep on watching or skip ahead, whatever works for you. Okay, I'm glad that you are sticking around with me because I think you will appreciate the first workflow. I've showed it briefly in my camera tracking tutorial. As usual, the link is in the description, but here it is again in its full glory. We are going to start with this free model from sketchfab.com. It's called Mech Drone, and it is courtesy of Willie the Carpentry. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So let's click on download and save it to the desktop. And now over here I can open the file. It's a zip file, so I'll need to double click, of course, to expand the file, and then I can say goodbye to the zip. And inside this folder we have another source folder with a texture folder. I happen to know that everything we need is located inside this zip, which has 2 zip suffix for some reason. So I'll double click again to expand it, and then I'll say goodbye to this guy. And I'm going to change the suffix to just drone here and take this folder and place it on my desktop, saying goodbye to everything else. I have a bit of experience with this model, and I know that everything we need is over here. So this is the file with all the animation, the FBX file, and we've got few passes of different materials. We're actually going to use just one of them, probably the diffusion. But for now, I want to show you how to bring this model into After Effects. Now I'm going to use Cinema 4D, which is my 3D weapon of choice, but everything that I'm showing to you can be achieved using Blender, which is a free 3D application. So whatever works for you, you are more than welcome to follow along with me if you have access to Cinema 4D. So inside Cinema, I'll go to File, Open, and navigate to where I have this drone.fbx, click Open, and then I'll accept all the defaults here. And this is going to bring the model with the character rig animation. I'll click Play in the minute timeline here, and we can get a sense of how this works. And of course, we need to reconnect the materials. So I'll open the Material Manager, click on the robot, and then for the texture, I'll click on this little folder and select the diffuse pass. This is the only pass that we're going to use. And it's totally up to you if you want to connect the fire material. I don't think that we're going to use it in this case, but you know, we are here, so let's do it. Let's connect the fire diffuse material as well. And then we can hide the Material Manager, move our timeline to somewhere over here, press and hold the digit 3 so we can orbit around the scene. Then I'll do the same thing with 1 so we can pan down. Then we can also zoom in and out. And this is just to check that everything is working. So I'll press also Command R to render a still frame. I'll go to the beginning and replay the animation. Very simple stuff, but this is what I want to bring to After Effects now. Now, if this is all I want, what I can do is just go to the File menu and save this project as a Cinema 4D file. I'll leave the name as is and save it inside the same folder, and then I'll switch back to After Effects. Over here, I already set up a project for this mechanic drone. So this is it. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate what I've prepared ahead of time. We have this obvious moon dust, which is a name of a preset for particular, as well as a 360-degree background using Trapcode Horizon, a camera move that you can see, as well as 3 point lights that we are going to use in a later stage. So I'll pause the playback, I'll bring the timeline indicator to the beginning, return to the project and double click on a gray portion to invoke the import dialog. and I'll select the drone.c4d file. I'll click open to bring it in, and I'll drag and drop it on top of the mech drone comp, and this is going to apply the CINEWARE effect to it, as well as render this viewport draft version. For the time being, I'm going to switch it to viewport, and this is going to get rid of this grid. And it's also showing us that everything is working, including the animation. But we can see that the drone is not obeying the camera that we have in this scene, because it is using the default Cinema 4D camera. We can fix it using this pop-up menu. So I'll select centered comp camera, which is going to compensate for the difference between the coordinate system of After Effects and Cinema 4D. And now this drone is going to obey the After Effects camera. I don't think that I like the fire over here. It's not really rendering well because we are just using the diffuse path. And this is the benefit of working like this, because at any moment I can switch back to cinema where my drone is still live and active, and I can take a look at the body element where I have these 3 fire options here. So I don't want to use them. I'm just going to delete all of these junk and press Command S to update the file. And After Effects is going to read the changes that I've made inside Cinema 4D and update the file. But it's getting even better because I have some control of this droid due to the fact that in the recent version I can access the object list inside Cinema 4D. So I happen to know that all the animation is inside the body element, which means that I can select it over here and then create a 3D null by clicking on this object. And sometimes you're going to get some surprises here. So in this case, you can see that it is flipping the object. So I'll press R to show the rotation, and let's try to flip it back to 90 degrees, and maybe also change the Z rotation. So we're going to start with a better robot, maybe something like this. I can also add Shift P and S to show the position and scale. Maybe scale this guy to 150, and then of course I can move it back to the center of the comp. And this is really nice because it is still going to obey the 3D camera. Obviously, it's not going to read the depth of field or motion blur, but at least we have some nice interaction. If I'll return back to the drone, I can switch the renderer quality to current, which is going to give me the full quality, and now I can render the file. Again, all the lighting is going to take place inside Cinema 4D. If I switch on the point lights that I have here, these are not going to affect this object because it is actually using the Cinema 4D renderer to create this image over here. And so this is how it looks after it's being cached. Not too bad, but I think we can make it even better by using Element 3D, which is of course a third-party solution. And to make it work with Element, we need to pop in back inside Cinema 4D and export whatever we've created there as an animated OBJ. So back inside Cinema, I'll go to File, Export, and select Wavefront OBJ. I'll make sure that inside the Animation tab, I'll switch it to All Frames, which is a necessary step if you need to bring it into Element 3D. And again, I'm demonstrating using Cinema 4D, but you can do the same thing using Blender. I'll click OK, and then I'll create a folder in the desktop. I'll name it Animated Drone, and finally click Save. At the bottom of the application, you will see the progress of the exported frames, and once this is finished, you can return back to After Effects. And this time I'm going to switch off the visibility for the 2 layers that I've created. So for the Cinema 4D and the null object, go back to the beginning and then press Command or Control Y to create a solid. I'll name this one E3D. Make sure it is set to the comp size, click OK, and then go to Effect, Video Copilot, and apply the Element plugin. I'll click on Scene Setup to get into the Element screen. And under File, I'll go to Import 3D Sequence. Navigate to the desktop where I saved my OBJ sequence, and I'll select the first one, click import, click OK over here, and there we have it. If you want to check that the animation is intact, you can click on Start Frame and scrub to the right. And then, of course, back to the left because you want to start from the first one and end at the last one. All right, I think this is good enough for what we need. So I'll click OK. We can see the materials are automatically being recognized. And the good news here is that you don't need to do anything else. So it is already obeying the After Effects camera as well as the depth of field. So you can see that it renders correctly. And another good news here is that all the lights that I have are also going to be taken under account. So just to show you, I'm going to select all of them, switch off the visibility, and then turn them on one by one. So this is my first light, which is over here. This is my second light. For some reason, it's down here. And finally, my third light is over here. So a basic 3-light setup. Now I'll go to the beginning and I'll preview this composition. And I think it looks really nice. And by the way, if I'll return to the element layer and open up group number 1, we have the ability to create a group null, similarly to what we did with the Cinema 4D model. So if I click on create, we now have a null object that we can move freely in the scene. And this is going to allow us to control the 3D model from here really fast and very effectively. All right, I'll switch off the visibility for those layers and I'll return to the beginning and show you another way to work. This one is going to be based on the Helium plugin, which is again a third-party tool. The link is in the description. So the process is very similar. I'll create a new solid. I'll name this one Helium. Click OK, then go under Effect, Helium, and I'll immediately add the model. I'll click on Import Model, navigate to the OBJ folder, the sequence that I've created out of Cinema 4D, select the first one, click Open, and it's going to bring it in. But both of these are going to respond to depth of field as well as the lighting. And of course, we have the null created for us automatically. So we can press S and scale this model, press also P or Shift P in this case and Shift R. And this is going to allow us to rotate this model and place it in a different location if there's a need. Now, both Helium and Element 3D are very fast when it comes to rendering stuff. So you can see that it is super responsive. I'll wait a few moments and then I'll go to the beginning, press spacebar, and already we can see everything working in concert. In this case, the lighting that we have in the scene, those 3 lights, look a little bit different on this model, so we need to tweak this if this is the way we want to go. But believe it or not, there is a 4th way. And of course, you waited for it because I told you about it in the outset of this movie. And this is using Red Giant Trapcode Mirror. And to work with Trapcode Mirror, we actually need to return to Cinema 4D and bake all the animation into the project. So we'll need to bring a point level animation inside the Cinema 4D file. Now this is a little bit of a work that we need to do before handing it to Trapcode Mirror. But the good news is that we don't need to worry about exporting an OBJ sequence. And another advantage is that after we'll bake it, we will be able to open it even with Cinema 4D Lite. So again, another workflow. Let me show you how I work with it, and you can decide which one works best for your needs. So back inside Cinema 4D, I need to select the layer that has the weight tag, the weight expression, as well as the skin rig. And I need to first cache it. So I'll go to the tags, and from the rigging tags, I'll apply the point cache tag, and then make sure that I'm on the first frame and click on store state. Next, I'll need to click on calculate, and this is going to bake this animation into the tag. The next thing that we need to do is go to the window menu and bring the timeline dope sheet. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting the layer that has the baked animation and dragging it to the timeline. Next, I'll select it over here. And from the functions, I'll check bake objects. Now, depending on what you want, I'm actually after the point level animation. So I'll make sure this is checked. So PLA. And then I'm going to leave all the other stuff alone. So I'm not going to select them. I'm also going to bake the expressions. I don't need to create a copy. It's totally up to you. And I'll click OK. And now we can see that we have keyframes for every single frame. And these are point level keyframes. So now we can actually clean this a little bit by deleting the weight expression. It is already baked into the object, as well as the point cache tag. So I can clear it, basically just delete it. And just to check that everything is still working, I'll preview the animation over here. All right, now to bring it into Trapcode Mirror, I'll need to go to File and then choose Save Project for CINEWARE. This is a very important step because this is the format that Trapcode Mirror will be able to read. So I'll save it over here inside the same folder. I'll call it Drone Baked and click Save. Then I'll return back to After Effects. And over here, I'll again start almost from the beginning, basically just switching off the visibility of all the other layers that I worked with. And you know what, just to make it more simple, I'm just going to select everything here and say goodbye to them by pressing delete or backspace. I know you got attached to them, but don't worry, because I think that what we're going to create next is going to be even better. And to show you how it works, I'll need to create another solid. I'll name it Mirror, click OK, go under Effect, Red Giant Trapcode, and apply Mirror 3. Over here, under Geometry, I'll change the base geometry to a 3D model, and I'll need to tell it which model I want it to use. So I'll return back to the project panel, I'll double click to bring the import dialog, and I'll import the dronebake.c4d CINEWARE file that I've created. I'll click open and I'll place it under all the other files. It doesn't need to be visible, it just needs to be here, and you can switch off the visibility for it. Since I'm already here doing some importing stuff, I'll return back to the project panel, double click, and also grab the material for the diffuse path. So I'll click open and I'll drag and drop it under all the layers over here and switch off the visibility. Back inside Mirror, I'll select this layer. I can now tell it to use the dronebaked.c4d file that I've exported out of Cinema 4D. You also have the option to invert the Z if it is upside down, but in our case, I think we just need to create a null object and then select this null, press R to show the rotation, and then just turn it so it will face us. So -90 in this case. And then back inside Mirror, we also want to define the material. So we can open up the material if we want to, but this is actually just the settings for the texture. So first let's open up the texture and tell it to use the diffuse texture as a layer. Now if I'll move my current time indicator, you can see that it is automatically responding to the camera and all the animation is intact. But otherwise, it's going to offer you a few other stuff that the other tools didn't have. For example, inside the material, now that we are marrying it to some texture, we have a few presets, which I think really works well. So first I'll return back to the null object and scale it so we can see it a little bit closer. Let's go with 200 in the first frame. And then return back to the options. I'll close the geometry. Let's just concentrate over here under the material. And I'll show you that you have few things that you can play with. So this is density. This is faceted surfaces, which looks really interesting. Let's just move it a touch so we can see. Just a different way to render stuff, but we don't need to go back to cinema, and those options like this wireframe are non-existing in the other options. So this is a lit wireframe, this is a hidden line option, a porcelain, and other stuff. And of course you can mix and match, so you can duplicate this and have a lot of fun with it. You can play with the ambient, with the specular, with the metal, as well as if I'll open up the shader options with the ambient occlusion. So I can make it a bit more intense and change the radius, as well as the way that it will affect the materials. And again, this renders very fast. I'll close up the material, also open up the rendering to show you that you have few options which may look familiar if you're using Element 3D, such as the super sampling options. So in this case, I'll set it to 4 times, as well as turn on depth of field by changing it to the camera settings. And as you can see, it renders really quick. So now let's maximize the frame and take a look at the final render. So there you have it, 4 different ways to import animated 3D models into After Effects. The last one was actually a teaser for the next tutorial, where I'm going to use Mir to bring an animated dragon and also integrated with a few other effects from the RG, which is Red Giant VFX suite. So stay tuned for that. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again as usual in the next tutorial. Take care and goodbye.